that you're holding, all the memories you hide, all the frail thoughts that echo in the corners of your mind. They won't even last a moment, they will soon be swept away when the ocean takes you in its arms and carries you away. But the ocean asks the questions and it holds the answers too. It dissolves away the lies about the things you thought you knew.
I'm Steph.
And I'm Meg, and this is Film Fatales. Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Thank you, Tyler, for that marvelous introduction.
Yeah, it looked like an actual film introduction, and I'm here for it.
Right?
So in case y'all didn't know, Steph and I have been doing this bullshit for a year now.
Yes, we have. So much has changed in that year, though.
God, yeah, it has. We started doing this last December, and then we were doing it for a couple of months, and then we ended up in the middle of a pandemic. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's weirdly, for as stressful as it got and having to take a step back for a couple of months there, personally, for my mental health, this, along with playing D&D, has saved my mental health this year.
I mean, it's always nice to kind of have... We've talked about that before with movies being your distraction and it being your safe space. And Fatales kind of became that in a lot of ways. And, a year later, this entire section of my notebook is all Fatales notes. And you don't get to see my notes for today because... spoilers, as we talk, they'll come up as we talk. Also, yeah. Hi, Chris.
I actually did not take notes for this one.
That's fair. I mean, I didn't take as many notes as I have in the past, but I just wanted to write down a few, my notes have changed in that year. I remember watching the Tom Cruise Mummy film and I had 4 pages of notes because I kept pausing it to write stuff down.
I had 4 pages of notes. I think I had 6 for Pride and Prejudice because it was just basically me screaming into a notebook. It was great. But yeah, that's really nice too, because we definitely transitioned from just watching movies that we were bashing or finding reasons to hate, and sharing a lot of movies that meant a lot to us and to other people. That was the coolest thing, was being able to bring in guest hosts and letting them choose the movies.
Yeah, I had such crazy fun with that. Other than June, which I picked those, but
but you picked good people to talk about them with, and they were people who were excited about talking about them with you. Yeah. I do have to say, I don't even think he's in chat, but I still laugh consistently going through my Fatales folder on my computer when I just see what Lee's episode is titled on my computer still. It legitimately makes me laugh every time I see it. And it has been almost a year since we recorded that with him and that we edited it and released it. So it just cracks me up. You can't go wrong when you scroll past a file and it just says it's a great movie.
It is a great movie. And now it's just kind of become part of the meme of within our podcast.
Yep, because I cannot say that phrase without thinking about him, and I'm just damn it, you have ruined that phrase for me forever.
But we love Lee.
We do. I would have him back in a heartbeat. Just pick another ridiculous movie for us to watch and have me question everything about life.
I still want to watch Now You See Me with both of you. That is a thing that I still want to do.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about doing that because I've never actually seen Now You See Me.
It's fun.
I heard. That's exactly what I told you when I told you what movie I wanted to watch today. Well, okay. First of all, I asked you how much I scared you because this has the most misleading title in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So in case you guys missed all of our posts or haven't heard us raving about this consistently, today we're actually talking about the movie 10-Inch Hero, which has the most deceiving name in the world because it sounds like a porno. It's not.
Yes. Or an animated movie. Or like one of those like combination live action animated movies of somebody becoming an action figure.
Yep. But that's, I told Steph I wanted to watch this because it just happened to pop into my head and I'm like, oh my gosh, because I know you liked Supernatural an awful lot. And like, I liked it for a while and then kind of fell off the bandwagon. But I heard about this movie through a friend of mine who is super into Supernatural. And I knew Jensen Ackles was in it. So I was like, hey, why don't we watch this? Because I remember this being, to coin a Steph phrase, a romp. And it is. It's that's I was watching it yesterday and I remember texting you and it's just like this part of this movie makes me so happy. And like I even remember telling you like some of the stuff for as dated as it is, like still holds up pretty well. Like punchlines aren't actually like your standard punchlines, and that's incredible to me, but we'll get into that as we start talking about this movie. But I actually had a friend of mine reach out to me and ask if we were talking about this movie specifically because of the Supernatural fandom. And I was like, no, I saw the movie years ago and I thought it was a lot of fun and I thought it'd be a lot of fun to talk about. And she was like, oh, well, because I know a bunch of people who just love it because they're into Supernatural and it's Jensen and Danielle. And I'm like, I knew Jensen Ackles was in it. And that's it. Like I'm not into that world like that.
You know, it's cool, it's fine. I had seen gifs of Jensen from this film before seeing the film, but never with the title attached.
Yes.
So I was just like, Jensen was in a random movie where he was punk for a minute. And I'm for this. Other than the really bad nose ring, I was for that look. And, you know, when you told me that, I was like, okay. Like, I was mostly just confused, not scared, because I'm like, you said words.
Right, but that's, I know it's got a very, like, questionable title, so I'm like, oh god, I hope she doesn't think that this is what this is, because it's not. Although that would have been funny as hell.
that would have been, you see, I expect that kind of suggestion on like April Fool's Day because it's not meant to be serious.
Yep.
But yeah, like when you showed me the trailer, I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. I think I told you this. I'm just really hoping it didn't go on my list of the things I do for you. Because I have a list of movies that I have watched for actors that I enjoy. Kit Harington has a few of them.
Oh, buddy.
Where I'm just like, the things that I have watched to support your career, I've only watched them once. And never again, because they were boring, and that's not his fault. But yeah, this was really enjoyable. I would probably, like, in a better mindset, let me put that out there, I would watch this again.
Yeah, because you pointed out something that I completely forgot about, and in my watching it, it wasn't nearly as bad as I was expecting it to be, but it was still pretty fucking bad.
It's one of those things, and let's back up before we jump into the heavy thing, just because on the off chance we have folks in chat, which, hi, we see all of you. Welcome. If you guys have commentary about the movie or questions as we go, please do chime in. We are watching.
Yes, I was gonna say I do have an eye on the chat, and we do have the producer here as well, who will relay stuff to us as well.
If we miss it, yes.
Yeah.
But the movie itself it's an ensemble cast. It starts off with Piper, and that's where you meet the rest of the cast, which are the employees of a sandwich shop in Santa Cruz.
We never actually get the name of the sandwich shop, do we?
It's Beach City Sandwiches or something like that.
No one
Cafe?
ever actually says it.
She does when she answers. Tish does when she answers the phone. And it's
that's true. But it's like such a like throwaway moment. You outside of that, you never actually hear them say the name of the shop.
Well, because it's not like it's not like a Jimmy John's or a Jersey Mike's. Like
right, it's like your little down home sandwich shop by the beach.
Yeah, exactly. So like the name of it isn't as important as the people. Like the first thing I literally wrote down is I love their help wanted sign, which I feel like needs to be like it's like part of the tagline to my life. Normal people need not apply.
Well, okay, so I actually missed that this time. I remember seeing it the first time I watched it, but I love that that's like a weird play on the song Signs, because that song starts with like him talking about seeing a sign in a window, and it says, long-haired freaky people need not apply. So it's like a play on that, but like they twisted it so it's like the exact opposite, which I also liked. Like there's a lot of musical references in here, and they're strictly because of Trucker, which is like the best thing ever. But they're all from that era, so it makes sense that might be what they were getting at.
Yeah. So the quick rundown, and we can get into everybody's individual stories as we talk about them, is you have Trucker, who is the owner of the shop, Zoe, who owns a crystal shop across the street, and I love her.
Me too. She's one of the best parts of this movie.
She is. There is Tish, Jen, Piper, and Priestley, who all work in the shop as well. And they're not like yes, they're employees, but they're like a little found family. Mm-hmm. And I love everything about that.
Like wait, I thought you said hiring was a democratic process.
We hired someone? Why wasn't I notified?
Why wasn't I notified? Why wasn't I notified?
Priestley, we hired someone. Cool.
Hey, Priestley, did you know that she thinks self-assisted? Oh, come on. You're hiring people that fail the interview now? Their interview process is actually one of the funniest parts at the beginning of this movie, because like it is a little weird that like the way that she just walks in and starts like drawing on their like specials board and then sets it down and just goes, I need a job. And Trucker's just like, okay. But like their interview is, Elvis, dead or alive. And then they go through this whole list of people, and then the last one, it's like Mariah Carey. Her acting career or just herself? No, just her. Oh, then alive. It's so good. I don't even know if this is an indie film, but this is like definitely presented as almost like an indie film.
It is. And one of the nice things about it, and I don't see like halfway through the movie, I didn't pause it, but like I picked up my phone to look up who wrote the script, because some of the things I'm just like, this was written by a woman, wasn't it? And I looked and I'm like, sure shit, yes it was. Well, and yes, y'all, just because it's early doesn't mean we're not gonna swear.
Oh,
if there are children listening.
we try. We're asking God for help with that,
right? I'm not.
No, which is really interesting, because that does translate. Because I found myself like not uncomfortable watching this movie at all, even during like those parts of the movie where they get really uncomfortable and they do get a little heavier, and like the way that it's written is just so natural and like not forced. And on one note, that's entirely due to the casting director and casting like really good people who do actually have a whole lot of chemistry with them, but like the way that like those relationships are translating and everything, you can tell was not like written. Now that you're saying that, I'm looking back at it going, yeah, no, you can tell that is not written from a male perspective. Not that there's anything like wrong with that. It's just you can tell there's like some subtleties in the way that women rate relationships and the way that men rate relationships, because you see like Tish not putting up with shit in her relationships. You see Jen like actually having relationship anxiety in her relationship, and that's Jen is one of my favorite parts of this movie because of her situation. Like it's so good, and I think I love her so much because I can relate to Jen like entirely, like not even just her situation but just her as a character and as a person. But like even that, you see like her relationship anxiety. You see even just like Priestley dealing with, you know, trying to deal with his emotions, you know, in a way that it's not great, but like you can see him trying to like section off and deal with like little bits of that. Even Trucker, like him being interested in Zoe, and every time she comes in, he just like shuts down because he just doesn't know what to say to her. And it is just the cutest thing. Like I've seen people do this before in real life. This is not like mutually exclusive to movies. Like I know guys that see like their object of affection, for lack of a better term, and they just get so nervous and like shut down because they don't know what to do with themselves, because like they just like this person so much they're afraid of like saying something to screw it up. And that's ultimately like where they sabotage themselves too. But like in this case he doesn't. And that's the reason why it's the cutest thing at the end of this movie. But it's very wholesome. And I'm glad you said that you looked that up, because I'm like, it's making a lot of sense now.
Yeah. Well, and it's little things, and it's stuff that like I as a writer am like not necessarily trained to notice, but I notice in the ways of storytelling. There are different ways that men and women tell stories. And it's part of the reason why if someone were to like put my writing through one of those tests, it fucks them up, because I break the mold a lot of the times in terms of how I write. But you see it in rom-coms when something is written by a man versus written by a woman, which is why some of my rom-coms are hit and miss. Like, especially with a lot of the more modern ones, because this film is from 2007, and there's still some stuff that's, like you were saying, like there are punchlines, but they're not really like punchlines. And then there are some things where it's like, ooh, that was so 2007. Like, please don't erase the fact that these people could be bi and are just not thinking about that and whatever, you know, what have you. But
well, and I think I know which situation you're talking about. And at the same time too, like there's a whole lot of toxicity happening in that scenario also, because of the reaction. Well, just because of the reaction. I know we'll get there, but that's, I was gonna say there's a ton of toxicity happening there because of the reaction to it.
Oh yeah, everything about that one was messed up, and that's why I want to talk about something a little more fun before we get into the heavy thing.
Oh yeah, I do have to say before we even get into that though, that while we are going to talk about it, that does not define that character at all, and I loved that. Whereas like in other places and other, you know, forms of media, that would entirely define the character. Yeah. Like we have a full-fledged character. It's not just like, oh, well, they've experienced this and, you know, like this is what defines them. It doesn't. And I think that's important to note before we get there.
It is. And that's kind of an important thing to note about everyone in the story, like not just in terms of like the thing that we're not quite talking about yet, but like everyone has their like quote unquote stereotype almost, but not really. Like they have a thing within the movie for their individual plots that define where their story arc is going, but you see very quickly that that's not the only thing that, you know, is about their characters. Like Priestley is a really good example of like when he shows up and he has the response, like, you know, you were saying when we were first talking about him, it's like, who opened, like we hired somebody, nobody told me. Like you're expecting him to be, you know, angry, mad punk guy, and he is the sweetest. Like he sasses, but you come to realize he sasses Tish so much because he's into her.
Right. Like I said, you see him trying to process emotions in a way that fits him. And it plays into that, like, oh, he's mean to you because he likes you, but this is definitely like significantly more playful.
This is significantly more Darcy.
Yes. Absolutely. But without the without even the things he says that are like incredibly like judgmental, like you can even tell that he doesn't actually mean them, if that makes sense. And that's not me like excusing his behavior. It's just you can tell like this is just a thing that they banter about all the time.
Yeah. And there's a difference between like ongoing banter versus actually saying things that hurt, because like one of the things that always, like, I'm backing up because I wanted to get this out before I forget the thought. One of the reasons I looked up whether or not this was written by a woman was because of how the usual like rom-com-y type tropes were handled. Because I've noticed in a lot more recent ones, Happiest Season being a good example from the loose description I got, or not loose, but loose summary I got from someone who watched it, who straight up told me I would hate this movie. But she's also a member of the community, so a lot of her like critiques of it came from that perspective, as watching it as a member of the quilt bag community. And it's like, this was written by a member of the community. How could you do that?
How could you betray us like that?
Well, it's just like weird little things. But like in that movie in particular, everything is blown out to such an extreme that it's like, you can't even suspend your disbelief that nobody would do that. Like, it is so extreme that this is like Arrested Development kind of satire extreme. Whereas 10-Inch Hero, yes, some things are like, that would never happen that way, but they do it just enough. They know how far to take it so that it's still believable, and you're gonna let movie without it taking you out of it.
Well, it's like even just before, because it's even before we get to any of like the in-depth stuff in the movie, they are asking Jen, who has been talking to this guy online for over a year, and they've never actually met in person. They haven't shared any like personal details, but like she's fallen in love with this person for who they are. And they're like, well, what if he's ugly? Looks don't matter. What if, he's paralyzed? If he can deal with it, so can I. What if he's actually a woman? And she goes, you know what? We'll find a way to make it work. And that's one of those things where I'm just like, you know what? Like, it's one of those like moments that should be uncomfortable and should be in there. Like, you can tell it was in there to be sort of a punchline, and it doesn't deliver like the shock value punchlines we're used to seeing with stuff like that. Where it's like, what if it's a woman? Ew, oh my God, no, what? Like, that's not how it's presented. And I love that, because there's a couple of these in this movie, including, Piper with, oh my gosh, Nathan?
Noah,
that was it. I'm like, I know it's an N name. I didn't write it down. Piper, when she's talking to Noah, she says, I have to, come clean about some things. And he's like, are you about to tell me that you're a man? And she goes, only from the waist down. That doesn't bother you, does it? And he goes, nah, I like a hung woman. And then the conversation moves on. Like, that's just how it's dealt with, and that's how it's handled. It's never like presented as a punchline. It is incredibly dated, obviously, yes. But like, that's the way it was handled. It's not handled quite like the shock value punchline that we would normally see that presented as. Like, just the sheer acceptance in this that's happening in this movie is like,
was refreshing.
Yeah.
Like, yes, there are dated jokes like that, and like a few others that come out. Like, and then I shouldn't say that's a joke, because it's not. It's something that's said very much in defense and anger. And while there are some bits of it that aren't necessarily wrong, it was definitely used as a weapon. So, but yes, as Alex points out, that what you're describing is definitely like Some Like It Hot, where he reveals he's a man, and Joel Gray's character's like, nobody's perfect.
Well, right. It's like even just well, okay. So to be fair, it's like listening to Lola now, and realizing that he is talking about either a drag queen or at that point, like we now were like know as a transgender woman. And then but like the entire song is just like,
okay,
this is my girl, like whatever. So it's like it's dated terminology, sure. I don't think it was ever actually I didn't get the anger or defensiveness. I got that more as like a playful, just like,
oh no, I'm talking about a different scene.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. That's
different scene.
Yeah, sorry, that was my bad. I'm like, I don't remember that being defensive. That seemed more playful.
Wasn't. Different parts of the movie where they had like similar
you're talking about what I was alluding to earlier.
Yes.
In the like, don't ever refer to me like that. Yeah, got it. Yeah. So because we keep skirting around it, there's a point at the end of this movie where Tish, who is dating a douchebag, and you can tell the entire time just based on how he is presented in this movie, we're going to address the Heavy situation because it is definitely a scene where it's like she and this boyfriend are about to be intimate, and then his best friend and roommate comes in and is like about to join them, and she tells them to stop, and they're like, what's the big deal? So like, on top of the situation being forced on her, they're being very coercive about it and trying to make her feel bad about it, and she ends up getting hurt. Like, he pushes her and she ends up with like a big gash on her forehead and getting hurt, and he's like, oh well, look at what you did. And this is why I love her character, because she just looks at him and it's like, are you fucking serious? What I did? And she leaves, she storms out, but he comes to pick her up the next day, and she goes outside with him, and she goes, I wasn't about to make a big scene in there, but there is no way in hell I'm ever going out with you again. And then he like tries to like, he gets really aggressive with her, and she's like, when are you and Brad going to admit that the girl is unnecessary and get on with it? He's like, what are you talking about? She's like, it's very clear y'all have the hots for each other. Like, just get on with it. And this is where he gets incredibly aggressive and hits her, because he says, if you ever call me queer ever again. And at about this point, he gets tackled by Priestley. Deservedly so.
So, yeah.
You get both ends of the spectrum, where you get these really accepting people who couldn't give less of a shit about whether or not like you are a woman who was previously a different gender, or if you are of the same gender and you've fallen in love with this person. Like, you get these really accepting people who just don't give a shit. And then on the other hand, you have this really toxic idea, not even, what did they call it? I've been watching, and I cannot recommend it enough. I've been watching a lot of cinema therapy.
Internalized homophobia.
Well, it's one of the notes of this, but he didn't refer to it as toxic masculinity. He referred to it as something else. Oh. And I can't remember what the term was he used. But for lack of that terminology, you get this idea of toxic masculinity and that really like internalized homophobia, and this really unaccepting, like closed-minded like group of people. Granted, he's also a trust fund baby, rich daddy living off of daddy's money, but like he's all around like really not likable. This just adds to it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, and I am like 80% positive that I have mentioned this on the pod before, but I am a survivor.
Mm-hmm.
So this scene hit me a little bit different, even though my situation did not involve a man. Because I am the even less reported same-sex domestic partner abuse survivor.
Well, and I will say too, like, it doesn't matter. Abuse is abuse, and these things will affect everyone. It doesn't have to be, you know, in a hetero-presenting relationship. Like, this stuff just does happen. It can happen with friendships even. And like, that does not make your experience any less valid now that we've gotten into the heavy shit.
Yeah.
Which I legitimately forgot that this scene was in this movie because I haven't seen this movie since maybe about 2011. And I remember apologizing profusely to you. I'm like, I am so sorry. Like, because I know this, like, and that's, I typically try to warn you if it's a movie I've seen before, like, hey, there is this scene that might be a little uncomfortable for you, just as a heads up. I legitimately forgot it was in there, and probably because it made me uncomfortable the first time, and I just, like, willfully blocked it out of my memory.
And that's fine. I am that unfortunate person where, like, the horrible stuff I try to block out ends up sitting in, like, the repository or the back of my mind for the worst possible moments. But my point being, the minute that Tad and his best friend slash potential boyfriend slash threesome partner walked in, I immediately went, this is going to go bad. They're both going to try to have sex with her at some point. And I will rage quit this movie if something bad happens to Tish right now. Because I am used to, and I hate to say it, I'm used to how men would have handled that scene. Mm-hmm. I'm used to how a man would have addressed those things. Like, and there is the sex positive part of my brain, which is something that we skirt on, but a lot of the stuff that we talk about, sex isn't a big thing because we're two demi women. Like, it's just not a thing that we're necessarily interested in.
Right. Or just our mind is not there. Like,
yeah. But there is a way to set up a threesome if that is your desire. Mm-hmm. Surprise threesome is never a thing that you do with someone, like, unless you have already established that will, want, won't list, and you know what the other person, like, unless everybody is on the same page and comfortable with each other, and you, like, in my mind, and this may be me being judgy, you have an established relationship. I am not a sex educator, personal opinion on that. But you just have that understanding and you are comfortable with all three people. There are some people who are okay with that, but generally speaking, surprise threesome is not a thing you do on anyone.
Surprise
period.
Anything when it comes to the realm of being intimate with your partner.
Yes.
Is not a thing you should do or ever consider to be a good thing to do.
Correct. Safe, sane, and consensual.
Yes.
Always.
Yes.
Consent as well. Like, these are things, and this was not happen. That didn't happen in this situation, and I was relieved when the scene ended, and it could have escalated more. And I was really glad when it didn't, when they just kind of let her, like, after pushing her and her hitting her head on the dresser, of letting her leave. I was like, okay, thank God. Like, and then it just got more uncomfortable when she goes into the shop the next day and she's lying to them about what happened.
You can see, though, because even Priestley knows something's up. Everyone can tell something's wrong, and just like, you know, that is difficult in situations like that too, because you don't want to approach it, because there are instances where people are in situations like that and they will defend it, and they will say, oh no, like they become the reason. Just like, oh no, I shouldn't have acted the way that I did. Oh, I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done that. And like, it's hard to approach those things because that's, you know, while they may recognize that it's not a good situation and those things shouldn't have happened and they aren't their fault, they try to reason it and make themselves the reason that those things happened, even though they're not.
The nice thing about this situation is I don't think that's what Tish was doing. I think she just didn't want to talk about it because in her mind, that was done. They were over. Nothing was ever coming out of that. Nothing was ever happening there again. She wanted to just move on with her life. And when she had more space, because they have that kind of trust with each other, that she may have broached it with them then, or she may not have, because she didn't want them to go beat this guy's ass for no reason. And then he ends up getting
For
his ass.
no reason.
Exactly. Or, for the frame of mind of her protecting them from getting arrested.
Yeah, or, potentially them getting hurt, because as far as we know, that's Priestley's not much of a fighter. Like, he's very, like, he's a very big person, in the sense that he is, like, very over the top and loud and, not necessarily aggressive, but, like, he does have his moments. And then you have Trucker, who's always also, like, very calm and meditative, and, like, that he gets referred to as the old hippie a lot. But even he says, when she goes out to tell this guy that she's not going to see him anymore, he says, just be careful if you go rollerblading again, because he knows what's up. 100% he knows what's up. And it's one of those, you wonder if, like, he just put two and two together, or if they actually talked about it, because, he does seem almost like dad to all of these, like, kids.
He does.
And then, they go outside, and this is, like, one of the best moments of this movie, because after this whole exchange and, like, Priestley tackling this dude, he starts wailing on Priestley. And
after Priestley turns his back, mind you, Priestley was going to lead Tish away, and they were done with the situation.
And he got provoked. Yeah. And then, so Priestley's down. Tish hits him. He hits Tish again. And Trucker comes out and goes, basically like, why don't you see what, maybe you should go or see what the old hippie, try the old hippie. And he comes at Trucker, and Trucker lays his ass out.
And it was the most satisfying thing ever, because I'm just like, he totally goes into this, like, mockery of a crane stance, I think, maybe.
I actually think that is a stance, like a martial arts stance. I'm just
believe
not sure what it is.
Yeah, I could be wrong. I'm just guessing. It looks like something out of Karate Kid. But he is actually, like, it's one of those, like, okay, I'm totally here for hippie who knows martial arts. And then it's like, nope, that's not martial arts. He's just luring him into a false sense of security before he kicks his ass. Which is when you find out the aging hippie was not a hippie during the hippie era. He's a Vietnam vet.
And which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And, like, I love the underlying kind of theme of this movie of things not being what they seem and reinventing yourself. Because that's what Trucker did, was he, like a lot of veterans from Vietnam and other wars, he came back different. Like, and Vietnam was also is a war that's very different than wars had been previously, because World War II, you saw what happened in those battles via the headlines, via radio and TV and, like, movie reel news. But you didn't see what went on from battle to battle. Whereas with Vietnam, there were TV cameras capturing what was going on, capturing what the US soldiers were doing, and just all of that ness that I'm not going to get into. My point being is that it was the first war that was actually brought into people's homes, and then people turned around and treated the veterans like shit, because they were seeing how the veterans were treating the citizens of Vietnam. And I'm not saying they were right or wrong, because I am not in a position to judge them. My dad was a vet, so I am naturally that person of, like, you support them when they're home. Doesn't mean you condone the actions they take. And they probably carry enough crap from having to follow orders that they may that because the thing I think people forget with going into war is part of basic training is breaking you down to rebuild you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a thing that it's how they condition people for war. People don't like thinking about it. So it makes perfect sense that Trucker would want to reinvent himself to someone that, you know, when he found his joy again, he wanted to leave that part of him behind because it wasn't who he was.
But he does still carry it with him.
Yes.
And he does openly talk about that. Well, and I've wondered for a very long time, and I've talked about it with my dad before too. His dad was in the military.
Mm-hmm.
He was in World War II. So he was a vet, and he never talked about it. And I've mentioned to my dad, I'm like, I almost wish he would have talked about it, like when he was still around. And his thing was, you know, he didn't even talk about it with them. And he wonders how much of it was because of like what he saw or, you know, because of orders he had to follow. And, you know, that was really eye-opening for me, even because that's, you know, people don't talk about that part of, you know, military service.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, I feel like not to make it a political statement now. It's just, you know, it makes me wonder because we do tend to idolize and glamorize military enlistment now. It makes me wonder if we've just lost sight of that because, you know, it's the gritty, like sticky topic that no one actually wants to address or talk about. You know, look at how many vets now even who have done tours who end up with extreme PTSD even because of things that they've had to do.
Or just things that they've experienced abroad.
Right.
Like it's not even necessarily something that they have done. It could be something that happened to them.
Right.
Or happened within their, you know, platoon or I'm forgetting the correct language now. But regardless, it is a conversation we could have for an hour about the I may regret this word choice later, but I can't think of a better one. The fetishization of World War II and World War II combat.
No, I know what you're getting at. That's it, for lack of better terminology.
Yeah. I have this very vivid memory, and it has stuck with me since freshman year of high school. My history teacher, who I loved all of the history teachers I had at my high school because they were amazing.
Me too.
And her name is Miss Mormon, ironically. Not a member of the church, but just the name. And we talked about World War II, but she also specifically talked about, like, she brought in her father's uniform from the war and had it hanging up in the room. And she also, like, she talked about being a child and going out to eat and, like, people paying for their dinner when her father would be with them in uniform.
Mm-hmm.
Versus when she was older and her brother came back from Vietnam and watching people spit on him.
Mm.
So, like, this has been something that's been, like, that I have
yeah.
that, like, generational thing, like, in my brain about it, and it sucks. And I just enjoy, and it's like Justin said, you know, points out in the chat, where it's like so many of the most loving peaceniks that he knew growing up were Vietnam vets.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. Like, I like that they took the time to show that side of things. I like that a lot of the things in this movie weren't what you expected it to be. Like, there is this stereotype of someone who's punk or goth or, like, in that part of the community of just being a very aggressive, like, angry person. And it felt very much like whoever the screenwriter who came up with Priestley actually fucking knew people who were punk.
Yes, that is exactly how it translates.
Because it's like the outer expression is just that. It is a rebellion against the norm.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that they're like angry, fighty people when it comes to interacting with others. Like some of the sweetest people I knew growing up were hardcore punks. Like full on mohawks and stuff where I could never do that just because I was poor. But we've
talked about this before.
We have talked about this before.
We moved into our punk and goth phases much later in life.
We did. I mean, I have more normal hair now, but I still I still love it. You can't see any of my tattoos. I have long sleeves right now. It's so nice to be able to say that, not have to correct. People can actually see us.
I know. It's amazing. But yeah, no, I was gonna say that definitely translates. And it's a lot of the things that even the heavier stuff in this movie were handled so well.
They were.
Like, they really were.
Yeah.
And you know, that's like giving every single woman in this movie their own identity, giving them their own personality, giving them absolute and complete control over what was happening to them. Because that is not a thing that you see afforded to women in media a whole lot. You see them having to like fight for everything, and like the defining moments for the female characters are having to fight tooth and nail for things, and finally maybe getting those things. And if not, you see the whole like defeated moment of them not getting those things, and it's just it was refreshing to not see that.
Yeah. It was also refreshing to not really see them set up as like, you know, we've talked about the women fighting other women and cutting them down. And I really appreciate the fact that was not the message here at all.
Like you see Tish and Piper jumping to support Jen.
Yeah. And you see Jen and Piper going to support Tish, like like, well, okay, we can't say Piper in that situation only because she wasn't there when the whole thing happened with the douchebag and the fight in the back alley. Piper wasn't there because she was off dealing with her own shit. But
which we haven't even touched on, and that is like, it's the weirdest premise to me. To like go and do something because it was all based on speculation. And she gets called out for it. She does, in fact, get called out for it at the end of the movie, which I thought was fantastic. And it's like,
every time somebody needs to be called out in this movie,
they get called out.
And it was amazing.
Yes, it's so good. Like I said, everything is handled so well in this movie. Because we start off thinking that this movie is entirely about Piper. And while she is our main character, we do follow her story a little more closely than anybody else's. You know, everybody is so intertwined that it doesn't, like, you don't even notice that there are subplots happening because it just makes so much sense to what's happening in the movie. Which I loved too. Like that integration was so seamless. It's not like jarring to jump from one story to the next, or feeling like, okay, we've finished this plot beat, let's move to the next plot beat. And like, but she moves to Santa Cruz because we find out after some talk that she had a baby at 15. And she was the oldest of how many siblings?
4.
Like 4
she had
siblings.
4 younger brothers.
Yeah, so she's the oldest of 5 kids, and she had 4 younger brothers. And you know, she says like she was helping a lot with them, and that her mom already had a lot on her plate, so she knew that she wasn't going to be able to keep her child. And you know, she gave her up for adoption and was in communication with the family very closely until her daughter Julia, because she does know her name, she did know what she looked like up until she turned 2, they were keeping in touch and sending her updates and making sure she knew she was okay. And like the last photos she saw were of Julia on her 2nd birthday because the communication fell off. And she she moves to Santa Cruz out of speculation of seeing, like, she looked up the family's name and, that's found a family, like there were a bunch of Millers in the area, but found the father's name, and that's has a daughter the same age as her Julia would have, and the resemblance to her is rather striking, and she has this artistic ability that seems to be hereditary in her family, because she says her mom was an artist, she's an artist, like, I believe she said her grandmother was too, like, it's a thing that's just been in the family. So she makes these assumptions, and I think she's only supposed to be like 20, somewhere between like 22 and like 25.
Yeah,
somewhere in there,
young 20s.
Yeah, like young 20s. So like makes these speculations based on young 20s logic, and jumps at the chance of being able to see her daughter again and making sure that she's okay and basically living a good life. And she ends up very intertwined with this family that she didn't ever mean to be intertwined with, and then finds out that this is not her child.
Yeah, okay. I have feelings about that storyline.
I do too, because first of all, like I said, the logic is not solid, and I have issues with that. And second of all, why not just come out and be like, hey, this is my name. Yeah. This is my situation. I don't know if this is the right people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why didn't you just reach out to them? Literally, all of your problems could have been avoided if you had just reached out and figured out, like,
if you just like called him and been like, I know this is unusual, but I just want to, it's like, if this is my Julia, I just want to know that she's okay.
Right, because, well, and that's, I was going to say, I don't know that I really have issues with the fact that she wants that and wants to know that, because she never wanted to not be a part of this child's life. She didn't even want to give the child up to begin with. That she felt like she had to, because the situation,
I thought
like
the
her family
was
situation.
That her mother didn't give her a choice.
See, I don't remember. I thought it was phrased, and like I said, I was like making dinner and stuff while I was watching it, but like, even so, she didn't want to give up this baby. So like, I can understand that logic of wanting to know that she's out there and living a good life and that she's okay.
Yeah.
But so like, I can't, say I have issues with that, because that is valid. That is valid, especially because she was promised, not that anybody owes that to the birth mother, but that's, because it can make things a little fuzzy, and that's, I know that can be very very complex, but like, even just, I can't blame her for wanting to make sure that her baby was okay. Like, I can't fault her for that, but the way that everything else goes is just so convoluted and unnecessary. She lies about her name, agrees to things that she probably shouldn't have agreed to, because it like integrated her into their lives under the basis of a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, it's a lot.
It's a lot. And there's other stuff where, okay, so part of Steph's take a shot every time she talks about having a single dad. But I had a lot of experiences growing up where my dad did date, and it took a while before I was ever introduced to any of those girlfriends, because, small children get attached. It is a thing. And you are, at least for my dad, was protective of me as well, of like, this is a big thing. So like, the minute, like, yeah, I met you once, but sure, I'll leave my daughter here to study next to you in a library while I go off and do something.
Mm-hmm.
Or, okay, you guys are bonding over art, why don't you be her tutor? Like, what? But that's what I meant earlier when I was like, okay, this is the rom-com suspend disbelief moment.
Movie's got a movie.
Movie's got a movie.
Yeah, because I thought that was strange too. I'm like, you've met her once.
Right?
Like, what?
Right. And I'll be honest, like, up until the point when it's revealed that Julia is not actually her daughter, like, everything lined up with the idea that maybe this was.
Yes.
Like the mom, something being wrong around the second birthday and things like that. And then when Noah does finally tell her about the mom, because the one time it comes up, he kind of shuts it down. And like the thing that bothered me was the way that Piper handled that moment. From what he was saying, it was like, girl, feel the room. Like, this is either a man who is divorced
or lost his wife.
Like, she's not here because of a choice. You could tell from his response. But she was at least like with it enough that the minute he was upset, she was just like, I'm sorry, I overstepped. And she backed out and left.
Right. She's just like,
girl.
I know, like, I pried, like, I shouldn't have, I pried, but, that's that whole storyline, while, yes, romantic comedy, and it is pretty decent, aside from a lot of the stupid logic, is not the most interesting plotline in this movie.
No, it's really not.
It's not.
It's not. Like, there's so many things, but we are going to go to a quick break in a couple minutes, so I don't want to get too deep. But as much as like movies got a movie at points, I did think that part of it was really cute. When things were going well.
Yes.
And how when they finally like sat down and talked about it.
Yes. And he basically like comes back and it's like, can we start over? Like, yeah, Julie and I discussed it, and there's definitely a vacancy in this family, and like at this point he knows her name is Piper, and like is basically just like, can we start over?
Which is the most adult thing in the situation, and I loved it.
Well, and she never intended to lie to him, and she does state that too, and that she does come clean about it.
Yeah.
Like,
she should have a lot sooner.
Yes, and I even think she says that I should have said something sooner.
Yeah. She very much did the thing, like you said, an early 20-something would, where she didn't think anything of it. She thought the moment on the beach when they ran into each other, like, she did not, like, I actually wrote this down because it's the thing that, like, made me kind of squish a tiny bit was, like, her stalking them was almost set up to be kind of cute, and it's like, it's only cute because we know her intention.
Right, and I didn't even think that was cute because I remember watching her like follow them, and I'm just like, that's weird.
Yeah.
But we will get more into that after the break. Go refresh your coffee, grab a snack, or some water, hydrate.
Also, Abe, that question is an entire episode. Why can't Hollywood come up with new creative ideas and stop making older movies or ganking ideas from pre-existing universes?
We will address this after the break because I watched this movie the first time with my mother, and I will share her thoughts on it after the break.
All right. Yes. See you guys in 10 minutes.
10 minutes. So from our favorite Spicy Alyssa in the chat, Jake asked what y'all were talking about, and I told him, and he goes, yes, the movie with the supernatural man, Jensen Ankles. Says the man who watched Supernatural for years. Yes, our favorite, Jensen Ankles.
Yep.
Also, Chris asked, if Buzz Lightyear doesn't know he's a toy, why does he instantly pretend to be one around humans?
I do not feel properly like researched to answer that question, but I'm assuming it's something to do with like toy instinct.
I was just gonna say that I feel like to me it would just be like primal instinct.
Mm-hmm. Where it's one of those like it is an unconscious reaction, excuse me, that he doesn't even know he has.
Yeah. Kind of like human fight or flight.
It's the same as something comes flying at you and you wince. No.
Gerald Padalecki.
Oh. I hate this.
I love this. Doesn't Jensen Ankle star across from Gerald Padalecki? Yes. Yes, he does.
He does.
Sorry, that was a good laugh.
But Jensen Ackles carries that show, what? With Misha Collins. I have nothing against Jared, but that's just Steph's hot take for a second if we're gonna slide right by Supernatural. I'm sorry. I am a
drive by Supernatural. So we're starting to talk before the break about how the rest of the stories are much better than the like actual designated main plot line. But
do we want to address Abe's question?
Yes, I was gonna say I'm gonna address Abe's question first because when my mom and I were watching this the first time, so basically what happened was I got the recommendation from a friend. It was on Netflix, so I went ahead and watched it. And my mom came in maybe about 20 minutes, 30 minutes in, sat down and watched it with me. And her first response upon figuring out what exactly was happening, which doesn't take very long to figure out, was, "Oh, this is Mystic Pizza," which is a movie from, I want to say, the 70s.
I thought it was the 90s.
Hold on, let me Google it because I've been meaning to watch it for years and I just haven't.
Pardon while we seen your Google. Well, here's the funny thing. So last night I was talking to Abe about this and kind of like
1988.
Okay.
So I was right. It was like 70s, 80s, somewhere in there.
And trying to convince him to watch it. And he's like, "Isn't this like Waiting?" And I'm like, "No." but I get where you're thinking it might be. It is much less blue. It is not about the humor of working in the service industry. They just happen to all like the shop is just what brings them together.
Right. I was gonna say it's just the focal point. It's not like it's not important. It's just what everything hinges on.
Folk, watch Supernatural after stream.
Yeah, come on, man. We don't see you ever, and you're gonna ditch to go watch Supernatural, sir. But yeah, so that's Abe talking about why does the industry happen to always just like revamp old ideas instead of coming up with new and original ideas. Dim NPR voices, you know it. Welcome to This American Life.
Welcome to Film Fatales.
Oh my god, I feel like as an April Fool's joke one of these years we need to do like a full NPR style one, like actually write out the broadcast.
Yes, let's do that.
Sorry, as we're shopkeeping in the middle of a show, almost like that's what we do and we cut out half the time. But
sometimes we don't.
No, sometimes we don't. It just depends. But I really think part of it is just they're interesting stories. They're stories that people tend to talk about a lot. Like recently, I've been talking with Steph about doing a back-to-back episode or potentially maybe even doing it as a Patreon release. There is a movie from, I believe it's 1941, that has Laurence Olivier in it. It's Rebecca, and it's based off of the book by Daphne du Maurier. And Netflix just redid this movie with Armie Hammer and, oh my god, why can't I think of her name?
Lily Collins?
Lily Collins, yes, thank you. Pretty sure it's Lily Collins. I can picture her, and that name seems to fit, so I'm pretty sure that's it. But like,
I'll ask you in your Google quick while you finish your thought.
That's a story that like, while it is popular and people do know it,
classic foil. It's Lily James.
The other
Lily.
Like I said, the name seemed to fit.
It's the other
wrong
Lily.
Lily.
I do that all the time.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, it's a classic story, and it's an interesting story, especially with just it's not even lying in that it's just a mission of like information.
Hmm.
Um, which when you actually get into it and you read it or you've seen the movie, like you kind of understand the reasoning behind it. But like, there's a whole lot going on. It's more of like a suspenseful thriller type of movie that also has this underlying romance in it, and watching someone struggle in like to kind of feel like coexist in this new like identity. But they're interesting, which is why Hollywood tends to revamp a lot of things. But there are some things that just don't need like 6, 7, 8, 9 reiterations, especially if they're not going to be done well.
Man,
Looking at you, The Mummy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, The Mummy did not need to be. That's the original is good. The new one is good. The revamp that they just did, we've already discussed, is hot garbage. It is entertaining hot garbage if you want just like that visual junk food where it's just like you don't really care. It's really bad and you know it, but it's like weirdly eating a bowl of mac and cheese, like comfort junk food. Like,
okay. So my turn to throw out my answer to Abe's question, because I have like a slightly different perspective. Like they're similar. Y'all are seeing how like Meg and I are similar, but then we also have our own different perspectives on it. Because one of the first things I learned in writing, because I it's real easy for people to say I'm a writer, but I've actually like 4 years of high school, and I went to an arts high school.
Honors in AP English, and then I was actually majoring in literature, and then ended up minoring in creative writing. So you got a couple of storytellers.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
Yeah, it was creative writing and journalism was my major at my arts high school, and then
I almost majored in that in college.
And then communications in college with a minor in English. So
this close to majoring in journalism. That's hysterical. Sorry.
So in case anybody forgot from our Fatales intro, we actually do have some training in media analysis.
Yeah.
One of the first things I learned in creative writing is there are no original stories. There are original storytellers. Because you can go back through a lot of these stories and like you can pick out beats from Shakespeare. You can pick out beats from the Bible, from Greek mythology, from Roman mythology, from Egyptian mythology. Like nothing in itself is original. It's the way the story is told. So like,
yes,
the easiest way to like sell somebody a movie is to be like, it's like this meets that. So like when people are like, oh, it's like Mystic Pizza, and I'm like, yeah, but with this twist. Like that's just how our brains process stories. And it's familiar, it's comforting, and in a way of like, we've known stories like this our entire lives. The things that make them different are the ways that they're told, like in terms of like 10-Inch Hero, where we had a lot of situations where normally, like, Tish is a real good example. We're used to the promiscuous character, if there is one in an ensemble cast like this, being a man, first and foremost. And if it is a woman, she usually ends up with some sort of taming of the shrew kind of storyline. Yeah. Where the whole point is for something bad to happen to her and her realize that she didn't need a bad boy after all, or to be, you know, open about wanting to have as much sex as possible with different people because that's her prerogative and she's entitled to that, is that she has to have something bad happen to her. So she realizes the error of her ways and goes for the good guy. And in case someone misses it, because I know I'm bad with tone sometimes, all of that was sarcasm.
Yup. And granted, you could probably argue that Tish does go through an arc like this, but she really doesn't, because she knows that she has a good guy there the whole time. It's just she also recognizes that neither one of them is going to do shit about shit.
Yeah. And that was the thing. Like, the thing with Tish and Priestley was that nobody pulled the damn trigger.
Mm-hmm.
He thought because she wasn't interested in him.
And she thought because he was too shy to ask.
Yeah. So it's a reversal of what was going on with Trucker and Zoe, where he's just not able to communicate, and she's trying so hard to just be like, I want you to, though. I want you to.
Well,
like,
and that's cute in and of itself, too, because our resolution for Trucker and Zoe is probably one of my favorites entirely in this movie. Like, I love Jen and her mystery man, but Trucker and Zoe are hands down like one of the biggest things that warms my heart in this movie, because we find them looking at the yearbook when Trucker's like, because that's Priestley's like, it seems like Trucker's got some splaining to do after he beats the shit out of Tad, and he's like, why don't we go back to my house? And like they basically sit and they're having, you know, a chill, relaxing evening. They're supporting Tish. He's showing them his old yearbooks and that he was captain of the football team and that he was kind of that like straight-laced kind of dude. And then Priestley goes, hey, Zoe's in here. And they're like, what? And they show the yearbook, or maybe it's not Priestley. One of them says Zoe is in here, and they show a picture, and it's a young Zoe, and he's like, oh my God, she's known for years. Like, he's been afraid to approach her because of his past, because she seems very like down to earth, like love everything and everyone type of deal, and like she knew all of this already, and their resolution is them sitting on the beach and talking, and she's just like, you know, we find out she was 3 years younger than him, like behind him in school, and she's like, you know, of course I like was head over heels for you, every girl in school was. And he kind of laughed at that, and she's like, but you didn't pay attention, like you wouldn't have paid attention to me, like, or the freshman girls, especially, you know, she lashed you like the flat-chested ones, almost like that had anything to do with it. And that's really not at all what it was. It's just they just never seemed to really cross paths, is what I gathered from that whole conversation. And he asks, he's like, well, what did you fantasize about us? And she goes, oh, a lot of things. He goes, well, tell me about it. And she's like, I imagined us being in love and being together and our hearts beating forever as one, which is a very Zoe thing to say in this movie. I have to admit, like, that is a very Zoe thing to say. And he just looks at her and says, I'm so sorry it took so long. And that is one of the most heartwarming moments of this movie, because it's just like, it's not that like admitting like, oh my gosh, I love you, oh my gosh, like this. It's not that big grand gesture of admitting feelings. It's just him being like, I'm sorry it took me so long to get to you. And it was just so sweet, and I just love it. And that's about when I texted Steph, I'm like, the end of this movie makes me so happy.
Yeah. It's so good to see like everyone gets a happy ending, and like they took the time to make sure every member of this cast got a happy ending,
whatever that meant to them.
Exactly. Like, and we touched briefly on Jen, but I kind of want to go back to it because Kel and I were discussing this. Okay. I'm bringing it because Kel and I were discussing it as we were watching it, because she was just like, oh, early 2000s. Like, you remember when they were telling you to be afraid to meet people you met on the internet, and
well, and especially as a woman now, still like, and it's now like, you know, it's easy. I feel like it's a little bit easier to tell when someone's hiding shit from you. And like, look at us. It took how long for you to even know like my address or like where I lived, or, you know.
Yeah, it took time, and building relationships and like, and things like that. Like, we had our first like face-to-face conversation when we recorded What's Up at the Moment. And then from then on, it was like, can we keep her? And
I'm pretty sure I said that straight up in the recording.
I think you did. Thank you, Tyler.
The voice of God just leaned into the mic and went, "You did." Because because that's what I do. Sometimes I'm really spot on about people, and just like, this is a great fit, and like, I adore this person, and they must stay if they would like.
Yeah. Well, and it's like Abe and I realizing that we met online coming like on that tail on the just coming up on 3 years ago, which is or 2 years, excuse me, because we met in early January of 2019.
You and I actually met in like early to mid June.
Yeah.
Of 2019.
So no, it had to have been 2018 because Abe was already part of. I was right. It was closer to 3 years. But
because you and I are coming up on 2.
Yeah, that's right. Because I met you and Tyler on the NX&Q Discord, and I met Abe through the Misfort Misfits, and then I introduced him to NX&Q, I believe. Which I did it in reverse. I found NX&Q and then found Loot and Dagger and Stellar Arcanum, and met you guys through NX&Q, and then look at where we are now.
I know.
It's a thing.
Sassing shit on the internet. Go figure.
Yeah. Which is why it's funny to see the movies where they have the message piece of like, oh, be careful about meeting people on the internet. And it's like, well, yes, be careful about meeting people on the internet is still true. Still be hesitant about like sharing your names and your full name and stuff. Like, respect, do that thing, be cautious. But at the same time, don't be afraid to make friends. Like, don't devalue those relationships just because they're online.
Right. And that's the thing too, like to borrow something that Abe said when we were recording for Face, when we did Truth or Truth, and we're networking because anymore, like, the internet is a great place to actually do that networking. Still vet people, still be very careful about it, especially as, and I'm only saying this because things are significantly more dangerous for women and female presenting people. It is really dangerous for us still. So yeah, absolutely be careful. If you are going to meet these people, always meet them in a public space. Like, don't invite them back to your apartment, your house, like, things like that, if you have not established that kind of relationship. Like, yeah, you do still want to be careful. Like, trust your judgment. If your gut is telling you that this person isn't safe, they're probably not safe. Your gut is probably telling you that for a reason. Like, it's also okay to approach things with having anxiety and knowing that this person is safe, but still having that little bit of anxiety anyway, because let's be real, we were brought up in the generation that's like, do not meet people that you have met online. Yeah. And most of our found families now we have found online. So always go through the steps. Like, don't just meet somebody without like having, because we have the option now to do video chats. Like, don't just meet somebody without like having done that first, that face-to-face first, because that is an option now. Yeah. If they dodge that, if they avoid that, and you never see their face, that's a big red flag. If they insist on meeting you alone, that is a big red flag. Yeah. Oh man, we should have had Tyler grab that clip. Is there a possibility? Cool. Is there a possibility that you can grab that 6-second Alex Myers big ol' red flag clip for us?
The producer is working on it.
Yeah, he just gave us the keep going. I'll find it. But yeah, like, there are big old red flags that will tell you that this person isn't safe and you should not go and do that. However, in this instance, Jen did everything correctly. She told them that it was going to happen. She told them that she made the decision to go. She told them where she was going. And when Tish and Piper were like, we're going with you, she just goes, thank you. Because you could tell she didn't want to ask that of them, but like also brought it up so someone knew where she was. Granted, I always used to do that too when I was doing the online dating thing, which, let's be real, fuck dating. I hate it. I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah, like, I will find a trap.
I will find something when it is meant to happen. That's I will find those things will happen when they are meant to happen. I'm not about to force it, but anytime I would go, like somebody's like, oh, let's grab coffee. I'm like, all right, where? And then I would tell my roommates where I was going. So like, I don't think Alyssa's up yet. So, but like they can attest to the fact that I'm like, hey, I'm meeting this person for coffee. This is what they look like. This is their name. This is where I'm going. If you don't hear from me in a couple of hours, or, just check on me, like just send me a quick message and check up on me. Like, I'll let you know. I should be home in like an hour, maybe a little longer if things go well. But like, yeah, there were a couple of times where I was actually sitting there for coffee on the dates going, ooh, that's a big old red flag. You are not a good person. I just yeah, it's just like it's a whole
it's
thing.
a whole mood.
Yeah, that guy sat there and told me about his best friend who he had the hots for, and like refused to date him, and like I don't understand why, and like basically talked down about the fact that they were ace, and I was told that they were also bipolar, and was used as like the lobbying things of like, this is why they don't want to be with me. And I'm sitting there like, ooh, you're a shitty person. That's also the same one that got dubbed Krusty because he laughed like Krusty the Clown from The Simpsons. Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes things don't go so well, but other times, like in the instance of what happened with Jen, things like I felt so bad for her in that moment, and that was definitely something where you could tell it was written by a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Because like of how real it got when she was just like, when has anyone ever like stopped looking at you to check me out? Or and like just things like that of like, I felt what Jen was saying about not being attractive and that pretty people don't look at you in my bones.
Mm-hmm. I did too. Why do you think I relate to Jen so much?
Shut your face. You're beautiful.
No. That's, you have to understand, because Tyler saw this happen a lot growing up. Like, that was not a thing that ever happened for me. Like, people did not stop to look at me. People did not care about me. Like, I was literally part of the woodwork. I relate to Jen on a personal level.
I get that. I do, because hi, me too.
Uh-huh. That's why I was like, oh yeah, nope, I'm just gonna solidify and not support this statement, because I also feel this. But that's, yeah, I was gonna say, you didn't know me in my younger years. Like, I was put down and minimized a lot, so like people just didn't give a shit about me. So like, I also feel that. I get that, and that it sucks.
Yeah, and I just am. I'm just saying I think you're pretty. Is all that I meant.
I know. I'm just saying, like, there is some history here. Like, it's not just me being like, oh, woe is me, I'm not pretty. Like, no, this is just was my existence.
Yeah. But I also appreciated what Priestley, like, I appreciated that both Jen and Piper supported Jen in her decision.
Mm-hmm.
And her not feeling comfortable doing it. I also at the same time was really appreciative of Priestley pointing that out to her. The way he did it may not have been great, but somebody needed to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that like we said earlier, every time I wanted something pointed out in the movie, there was at least one character doing it. 80% of the time it was Priestley.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciated him for that.
Well, and that's the thing, because they make him out to be like he is about to be the toxic masculinity in this movie, and he's not.
Because before we wrap, I need to talk about that sweet boy.
Yes, we do. There needs to be much love for Priestley.
Yes. And this is actually a great segue into it, because the whole time after Jen kind of backs out from actually meeting her online friend because her online significant other, really, after seeing what he looks like and that he is a good-looking man, and freaking out because she's had the bad experience that you have had so many times, and she's so scared of it happening again with someone that she feels that close to, that she just shut down and was like, I can't do this. I just can't do it.
That, my friends, is called relationship anxiety.
Yes, it is.
And I suffer from this a lot.
Oh yeah. It is a thing, TM, but not even TM. It is just a thing. And the one thing me as the storyteller and the viewer really wanted to happen here was I wanted somebody to reach out to this guy and tell him what was going on and try to set up a meet in a more comfortable place in the shop, which is what I was hoping somebody was going to suggest in the first place.
Yes. And I do have to say, too, you were talking about people getting called out, because after that, I forgot that he does this, but Priestley calls Jen out for what she did, because Sorry, I was gonna say, because I must have missed you specify that specifically, but that's like, you're afraid he's gonna judge you, and then you judged him on the same basis. Like, how is that fair? And he gets really upset about it, and I loved that. I loved that so much.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that's something that, like, this is the first time in the movie that we really actually see. Not that we didn't see Priestley before, but you really saw something in the core of him that is the reason why he hasn't done anything in terms of speaking about his interest in Tish, which you don't realize at first he has. Like, at first it almost comes off like either he is frustrated by the double standard of it, of like, if it were a man doing this, he would be seen as a horn dog kind of thing. And then as the movie progresses, you realize it's not that. Like, for a split second, I thought, okay, maybe it's a weird deflection of him being protective of her. And then I realized, around, like, just before it hit this point, that it was, no, this is all because he likes her but hasn't said anything because he doesn't think she will see him. Like, I feel like a working title of this movie could have been, illusions or miscommunications. Like, excuse me, it is almost like
misconceptions.
Yes, it's almost like we're a fan of comedies of error.
I do love a good comedy of errors. Like,
I like ones like this where it's a believable comedy of errors.
Yes.
Not the ones where it's just like, okay, but why though?
Yeah, no, and that's well, and this is great too, because it is an entirely rewatchable movie. As seen by the fact that I was like, I watched it many years ago and watched it again, and now I'm thinking, it's like, man, I could probably add this to the list of comfort movies. Like, I should probably just get a copy of this for myself. Because probably. It is like it's a very believable and very relatable comedy of errors. Like, these are misconceptions that I've actually had and dealt with in my real life. Like, outside of the aggression that Tish deals with, like, everything else is believable and I've experienced, and like, it's a thing. Like, these are it's just a very real life story. Like, this could very easily happen, and
very much so.
No one would bat an eye at it.
No, and that's what I enjoyed about it. And like, I said before, I like that everybody gets a happy ending in the end.
Yes.
I have one problem with this movie, which is funny when it's me and you're just like, wait, you only have one?
I think I know what your problem is, and I actually may have just had this conversation last night and kind of defended the choice, because if you're talking about Priestley at the end of the movie, Yep. I had this conversation with my Alyssa last night in the sense of, I understand where you're coming from, but it was never specified that that is how things remained, because we already know that had nothing to do with that decision. Like, and Tish's reasoning for agreeing to anything that happens.
Okay. On the off chance anyone is listening to us in chat who has not seen the movie.
I wanted to skirt around it because I know you wanted to talk about it.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. I am very much the person of, which is odd to say when you know that like one of my favorite Disney movies is The Little Mermaid, where part of the premise is her changing herself, but it was never for a man. I will fight anyone who argues with me. There is an entire fucking song of her talking about wanting to be human before she ever meets Eric. So she always wanted to be human. He just gave her the motivation to actually activate that desire. So I will fight tooth and nail anyone who tries to say that she did that just for a man. But only in the Disney version. We are not talking about Hans Christian Andersen right now.
Oof. Nope. Mm-mm.
And so, like, I have a real problem when it is alluded that he needed to change himself, because, as I mentioned, the entire movie, he is the sassy t-shirt wearing goth whose hair changes every, like, there's a real hard time of figuring out how much time has passed in the film, because it's in Santa Cruz, which, from what I know from friends who have lived in that area of California, they have no seasons.
Yeah, no, there's at one point where Noah says, they say it's easier to put kids to bed in the winter because the sun goes down earlier, but I've never seen that. So like we know some time has passed, but we're not sure how much.
Yeah. And that's really the hard thing, is like there's no, like, other than Priestley's hair changing colors, you don't really have a function of time. And if he's doing colors the way that a lot of the punks that I knew back then did them, which was semi-permanent dye, you figure maybe one hair color a month, depending on how much of that bottle he had. So if hair dye is a way of telling the length of the movie.
Well, it could also have been colored gel.
It could have also very well been colored gel, because Jensen does have light colored hair, which a lot of people don't realize this, but he does. He has similar hair color to my natural hair color. And but like, I understand why he made that choice. I understand toning himself down and putting on a button-up shirt to ask her out. I get it. It bugs me because it felt like a reverse of the Taming of the Shrew. And instead of the speech being her being, tamed to, roll credits it's him being the one that's tamed, which I know wasn't the point. And as you said, we have the wedding scene at the end where he still has that similar look. We don't know
how much time has passed since then, because I imagine it wasn't a lot.
I did as well, just because of, things didn't seem to have any kind of major change in them.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Nothing seemed like anything, like, doesn't seem like Piper and Noah have progressed anything past like the beginning of a relationship.
Yeah.
Priestley and Tish don't seem to have progressed any further than the beginning of a relationship. It would make sense that Trucker and Zoe would have just gone and done this already, because they already had that pre-existing relationship. They had known each other for years. They like know that would function. So like that would make sense to me. I always just assumed this was not long after that all went down. However, I did note to my Alyssa last night, because she's like, I hate that he changed himself at the end. And I'm like, but did he? Because to me, that was him making a gesture. While it may have been a very big and grand gesture for him, it's never stated that that was necessary for Tish to have agreed to go out with him, like agreeing to go out with him. Like that was him making the gesture of like, yeah, I know I'm like this, and I know I'm bristly, and I know I'm like, you know, sassy and all these things, but like I do care about you. And like there's nothing that says Tish didn't like him and would have agreed to go out with him before all of this. Like,
you're not wrong. I'm not going to argue that. It, like, my biggest thing was, it, like Alyssa, it was that he felt he needed to. And you're right, it could have been a gesture, but like, he cut his hair too.
He didn't.
Yes, he did. You know how I know? I do similar things with my hair that he does. And it's long. Like when it's down, it's like here.
Because to me, it just looked like it was slicked down. Not that it was cut. Okay.
It was shorter. So he either, if it was a very pigmented color gel, or he just dyed his hair, he stripped and dyed it. Like, I watch too much Brad Mondo, and there's the part of my brain where it's like, there's no way you stripped and re-dyed your hair in one night and it turned out that good, unless the color was, you know, a non-permanent color, and
which
you
is
weren't bleaching
funny
it every time.
Which is funny because apparently there are a lot of professional like hairstylists and colorists that actually cannot stand Brad Mondo because they're like, everything he's telling you is incredibly inaccurate.
I've talked about it with my stylist who watches him on occasion, and she's just like, a lot of the things that he says are things that like there's experience that he doesn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the advice he gives isn't necessarily true because he has the experience to know otherwise. But on the whole, it's not like he's not giving terrible advice.
No, but it's probably not advice to follow either.
Yes, it's
basically where I'm getting with this. But that's
yeah.
But that's the thing. Like this whole scene to me translated more as a gesture than him feeling the need to change himself. Just like it's like the big grand gesture you see in rom-coms where it's like, you know, the boombox scene and Say Anything, the marching band You're Just Too Good to Be True in 10 Things I Hate About You, which is in fact a retelling of Taming of the Shrew.
Yes, it is.
I love me a good Shakespeare, modernized Shakespeare retelling.
I do. I also love me a good Heath Ledger movie.
Same. Especially young Heath Ledger. Love me some young Heath Ledger. But yeah, it's just like, to me, that translated more as just a, you know I don't have to do this, but I want to do this to show that I mean it and that I'm serious. And like, you know, that to me made it seem like he wanted her to take him seriously, not that she couldn't or wouldn't in his true form. But that like, it, you know, he does come across a certain way in, you know, like with all of his piercings and the color in his hair and his stupid funny t-shirts, and like this was him wanting to be taken seriously. And what does everybody do when they want to be taken seriously and like an adult? Like, look at it when you go into a serious job interview. Do you show up with like, you know, your hair in a mohawk and a t-shirt that says orgasm donor on it? No, you go in like, you know, your khaki pants and your khakis and your button down shirt, and like, yeah, now you can get away with like going in with your colorful mohawk, and you know, no one really says anything about it as long as your clothes are professional. You know, so to me that was like that translation of like professionalism, it translates as serious. And it was more like a gesture of wanting to be taken seriously, and like, this isn't a joke, and like, I actually care about this and want to put in the bit of effort, so you know, like, that's just me.
And I get that. Like I said, I'm not telling you that your interpretation of it is wrong.
No, and I'm not telling you yours is either.
Yeah, I feel like it hits differently for like me and Alyssa, who, and again, this isn't to say like, you know, you weren't punk. kind of a thing. But it hits differently when you've incorporated some of those beliefs into who you are.
Right.
And it feels a little bit like selling out in that regard. Which, again, that's not to say that's what he was doing. The other part of the problem, and this is just me being an ass. I'm gonna say that off the bat, but I'm gonna point it out anyway, because we always talk about like effects and things. Motherfucker would have had a dimple.
Okay, I had the same fucking thought. I'm like, okay, you can tell that those were glued on because he would have had a hole there. There would have been a dimple in the skin from where he took out the lip rings.
And there would have been ones in his earlobes, and the nose would have been less noticeable because it was a ring, and it where it entered the nose, you wouldn't have seen it on camera. But as somebody who has multiple ear piercings, as somebody who lives with someone who had her upper lip pierced and then got it re-pierced while we were friends, like, there's a scar there when there's no piercing in it.
Well, it's like you can't see
also,
mine
you don't
currently,
take out
but
the
like
lip piercings because they tend to move, so he'll never get that back in now.
Womp.
If he were smart, he would have put a flat plastic one in, because they have ones where it's just clear and you can cover it with makeup, or just, you know, a little small ball that's plastic and clear. Like, there were ways to do it. Obviously, whoever did this didn't take the time to do that. Sorry, I cut you off from what you were going to say.
No, you're good.
That was my biggest thing, where it's just like, God damn it. Like,
No, because that was my thought too, was like, as someone who has several piercings and, you know, now has this one as well, where that hole is never going away. Like, if I take this out and decide I don't want the bar in anymore, I'm going to have to put rings in instead, because that hole's not going anywhere. Like, that is forever there. Even like I'm not going to be able to hear you for a second, but like, even these here, you can see there is still a very definitive hole there for the earring to go through. I haven't had earrings in there in months, but like, they exist there, they stay there, they take a very, very long time to close up. Like, you pretty much have to let them go for years before like your ear piercings close back up and heal over. And even then, I'm pretty sure there's still a little bit of scar tissue that exists underneath it. But like, facial piercings take significantly longer if they ever heal.
Yeah, and my parabatai had I think it's a Maryland.
It's a Monroe.
Monroe. I always flip which.
Yeah, no, it's a Monroe piercing, because I actually wanted one for the longest time, and then I'm just like, I don't want to deal with that hole potentially being there forever. I also do actually have a freckle there, so it's cool. It's cool. Sorry,
yeah.
Anyway.
But she had one when we met, and then she took it out for a job interview because she had to, and that was before finding like surgical grade plastic ones were readily available. And then the hole on the inside shifted, so she could never put it back in. And a couple years ago, she finally pulled the trigger and got it redone. So now she, like, almost in the same, like, obviously it couldn't be in the exact same spot. I think they actually tried to reuse the top hole. So it's like near enough that you don't see the scar, but she had that scar for years. Also, Justin, going mainstream, and I should rephrase that, so thank you for, like, in your own way, just reminding me, changing your appearance from looking like that kind of punk to more mainstream is not in fact selling out. You only sell out in terms of like, the term sellout comes from being an independent punk band and then suddenly being signed onto a major record label. And that is selling out. Changing your appearance because you need to be taken more seriously because you have to be an adult now, you know, isn't selling out. That is the late 2000s punk in me being a brat, and me also acknowledging like my own hate of that having to be the case.
Right.
I
Well,
really,
it's like going from high school goth to refined goth.
yeah.
Because that is a thing, but it's definitely like taking hints of things that you would have been doing. So like, or things that you would have liked to have done in my case, because I never felt like I had that space to be that person. So like now I go and get my hair like dyed in a certain fashion because I enjoy it. Not because it's more marketable, but it is pretty and I like it, and it means I can dye my hair sometimes. And like wearing things that do translate as goth on paper, but like also translate and work well into the professional world. So, you know, I like things with little, like the little cutouts in the shoulders and like with a little bit of lace overlay or inserts, and like, you know, that's things that would be classifiable in that category because of the aesthetic of them, but still translate well and can be worn in the workplace.
Yes,
so like there is a difference.
There is. And personally, I'm just hoping that, you know, they're able to come to an understanding of being more comfortable with each other and being true to themselves.
But that's what I'm saying. It was never presented like that was the thing, that they weren't comfortable with each other as themselves. Like, that's why to me this translates more as a gesture of wanting to be taken seriously in that moment, rather than I'm changing myself for you to accept me. Because she always accepted him. She always did. Like,
and that's true, because like she could have made fun, like, I know we've got like 2 minutes, but I want to talk about this because it was probably my favorite part of this damn movie, was Priestley going on a supply run.
Oh my God, and calling Tish and just being like, abort, abort.
Because I knew that's exactly what was going to happen. He was going to get in that aisle and there are too many choices and he's not going to know what to do. And instead of making fun of him, like, the rapport they had in that scene was amazing, and it's so fun to look at it now knowing the two of them are married. Like they weren't. I don't know if this movie is how they met, but I know they were not married when it was made.
No, I'm pretty sure that's the movie that like that's the set they met on.
Yeah. And so it's just adorable to see their like back and forth, you know, even with the written banter, just right there of like, she understood what he was saying after a second and was just like, nope, here's what you do. You look here, you get this, it's okay.
Right.
And then that part was funny. The part that took this even further to it being my favorite part of the damn movie is when he's going to check out and you have the two awkward ass nerds, and as a nerd,
the teenagers at the magazine stand, and his
with
overcompensation.
A fucking Maxim.
Yep, and his overcompensation.
But his overcompensation was like partially that, mostly true, because it's just like, yes, in fact, that's exactly what it means, is like, you know women who are comfortable enough with you buying feminine products for them at their most vulnerable. And it's like, the funniest part of that was like randomly, like as the moment went on, there were a bunch of other men in the shop who were like showed up in the background to listen to him, which was really funny.
Oh my God. Like I said, it was like an overcompensation, but like in the funniest way.
Yes. And I think that's the perfect note to leave on as we wrap, because it is now 1:00 Eastern Standard Time.
Yes. And that's, if you haven't gathered, this movie is in fact a romp. It is fun. It is enjoyable. And
it's
highly
available
recommend
on
it.
Amazon Prime.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because it was available on Amazon Prime, but when I went to watch it yesterday, the only option it gave me was that like Tubi or whatever it is. So I ended up having to watch it with commercials. So
weird.
Yeah, it was bizarre.
I watched it just fine on Prime. You have to remember when you're looking at the Prime ones to not open the one where it's the small movie poster, but the larger one that has included with Prime on the corner.
I don't know, because I watched it on the TV, so it may have just been
through the PlayStation.
Yeah, see, mine just came up with that as like that I clicked on it and that was the option it gave me. So it's very well that I could have just watched it on Prime and just clicked the wrong thing. But it's whatever.
It's cool. It's fine. It's cool.
Yeah,
but yes,
but it is available places for free.
Yes.
If you don't mind some commercials, so you can get up and use the bathroom. Like, I think there's 4 total in a movie that's almost an hour and 45 minutes. So
Yeah. And it's, like I said, it's available on Prime. It's a good flick. Thank you everybody for coming and hanging out with us.
yeah.
We see all of you in chat and we appreciate you being here.
We weren't there yet, voice of God. Sorry, for those of you who can't hear him, Tyler's like, who are you? And it's like, sir, we weren't there yet. So as always, I have been Meg.
I'm Steph.
And this has been Film Fatales.
You can find Meg in the chat. You'll see this going through as well. At Twitter at @morelacer. I'm at Steph_Bard. You can find all things film Fatales at FatalesCast on all 3 major social medias. We release the podcast bi-weekly. We just dropped an episode on Mirror Mirror. Watch that space on Wednesday for our holiday themed episode because it comes out the day before Christmas Eve. So
it's gonna be good.
If anybody on the off chance is actually going to be traveling to see family, it's a fun listen. If not, you can also listen to it while you're wrapping gifts for the people going to see at home.
Mm-hmm. It'll be a good time. And we need to address this. Steph edited that episode entirely by herself, and I am so proud of her. Like, did the music and everything. Like, it's a thing. Sorry, that's like we've been working on this for like a year because it's something Steph wanted to figure out and help with, and she just did all of it by herself, and I'm so proud of her. So
it will be more noteworthy when I do it without you in Zoom guiding me.
I wasn't really. I was trying to do it by ear while I was doing other things. So that was all you, boo.
But yes, so thank you all for hanging out. Remember, we are still raising money on stream for Heal. We will have more information coming out over the course of the week, and we may even have a charity stream coming up soon. And that's all I'm going to say about that because it's not my project, but teasing that out there because we like doing that on Brunch.
Information on that will be live, I believe, this afternoon.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Either this afternoon or tomorrow. I don't know which. Mm-hmm. But soon. Soon TM. But yeah, thank everybody for coming out and enjoying our first live show and our brunch takeover.
And if you guys like this, please feel free to bombard the Craftic Studios Twitter.
Yes, or the Fatales, or on Discord.
I was just gonna say, or the Discord, and let us know, and we will try to figure out more of those soon, and maybe try to get the movie out to you guys with lots and lots of time to watch it before we get here.
Maybe in the future it'll be a poll.
Who knows? Maybe we'll even do watch parties with the Discord. We will see you guys next week.
In the castles made of sand, you tried to hold it in your hands, you tried to understand it.